Good morning, Highland High School. Thank you so much for your respectful behavior this morning. This is my favorite assembly of the year. I have such great respect for the men and women who fight and serve our country. And I'm so honored that we're able to do a presentation today to talk about them. Thank you, Joel Hawkins, for all that you've done to put this together. Thank you to Mr. Wilson and John Case and the band, and Mrs. Ruphausen and the choir, and a special thanks to all of the veterans and their families who have come today. I would like now to introduce the band and the posting of the colors. From here on, I'm not going to talk. The assembly is just going to move forward, and we'll start with the posting of the colors.
Now, the posting of branch colors. this time, we would like to recognize the various eras that are represented here, over here, where the veterans are. You see, some of them are pretty fragile and aged, and some of them are a little more younger and spry, but we're going to recognize right down through the eras. We have a special recognition later of the World War II veterans, but we still want them to stand so that they can be recognized. World War II fought by the United States from 1941 to 1945, and in September of 2015, it's estimated that there's 847,000 left. 413 die each day. These are the World War II veterans that we have here with us this morning. Please stand, World War II veterans, and be recognized if you can. Thank you very much. More on them later. Now, the Korean War was fought from June of 1950 until July of 1953. The United States suffered 36,516 deaths during the Korean War. We have some Korean War veterans. We'd like you to stand and be honored this morning. Thank you, Korean War veterans. The Vietnam War went from somewhere around November of 1955 and completed in April of 1975. There were a number of Americans, 2.5 million of them, that served in Vietnam. 58,000 did not come back, 58,000 plus. And today we have a number of veterans that served in the Vietnam War era, and we would like those to stand and be recognized right now, please. The Gulf War was fought from August of 1990 to February of 1991. 294 Americans were killed. Veterans of the Gulf War, would you please stand at this time? And finally, the wars in Iraq, which began in 2003, and Afghanistan, which 2001. These have been deadly conflicts as well. 4,489 dead thanks to the Iraq War, 2,356 in Afghanistan. And if you have served during the Iraq or Afghanistan period, would you veterans please stand right now? So those are the different eras. We are, at this time, we're going to have the Highland High School Chorus come forward with the Battle Hymn of the Republic. the Highland High School Choir. That poem, by the way, was sold for $4 by Julia Ward Howe to the Atlantic Monthly in February of 1862. She came to that while she was stomping around the Civil War campfires. And it's still an incredible anthem. Thank you, choir. Won't charge you any extra for that information, by the way. As we mentioned, it's been 70 years since World War II ended. 70. And when the folks say they're veterans of World War II, do the math. They're getting up there. Last Memorial Day, I got on a wagon out here in the Highland High School parking lot, was headed to the commemoration of the new park and the Veterans Parkway and all that sort of thing. And I was riding with a veteran who was telling me he was at the Battle of the Bulge. He was talking about how cold it was and how he had been there. He told me his name was Gene Cordy. And I said, you know, I gotta have that story. I gotta have him in front of you folks. You guys need to meet him. You need to touch the Battle of the Bulge. So a couple of weeks ago, I called the Memory Care Center where he was living, and I talked to him about his experience. And I agreed to meet with him the next day, went to meet him, and they said that he had a little breathing episode, and that I should come back later. So a couple of days later, before I did, I checked with his daughter, Jeannie, who lives in our neighborhood, and I said, how's your dad doing? And she said, he passed away. Kind of caught me short. And it's an illustration of how fragile life is, especially now as these folks reach these later ages. But I'm still going to tell the story. We have an empty chair down here in honor of Eugene Cordy. And you see his picture up here. He landed on Normandy sometime after D-Day. He endured sniper fire. A man in his line was hit. At one point, he received a letter telling him that his brother had been killed in training exercises in England. You can see his brother's banner on the parkway, the Veterans Parkway, as you look. His name is Jerome Cordy. There's a newspaper over here, my handy little team is going to point it out to you, a newspaper from 1945 that talks about the Cordy brothers fighting in World War II. Well, he fought at the Battle of the Bulge, and his son told me that he would never go camping with the family. He said he'd already done that in Europe. Didn't have to do that again. This man was from Huron. He loved baseball. I'm a fan of him. And he says he was a catcher. We just lost him. The empty chair represents Eugene Cordy. How about a salute to Eugene? So I thought with that in mind, one of the things that we should do is really emphasize these World War II veterans because of the age of things. And one of them, seated over here on my left, your right, is Laverne Strawhide. He's in the coat here and in the wheelchair. He is 96, almost 97 years of age. Grew up in Jamestown, Illinois. Talked to his mom about leaving town, ended up heading to LA and a ranch hand in Wyoming and back to northern Illinois and then off to a driving job to Tucson, California, New Mexico, various places before he got drafted. Or a notice of the draft, I should say. It was at that point that he joined the United States Navy. And in February of 1942, he was assigned to this USS San Miguel. You see the ship up here on the overhead. He transported, and this is an example, by the way,
of the world war that these folks were in. They transported troops to Alaska initially on that boat. In 1942, December, his ship ran aground and they were dry docked. But he talked about how cold it was in December in a ship with no electricity. Anyway, they went back to the Aleutian Islands of Alaska, where they were attacked by a Japanese sub. Their escort ship rammed that sub and sunk it. They brought prisoners back on board. This is still that ship. They were bombed by the Japanese at Ankitka Island, he said. That's up in Alaska. In May of 1943, they were in on the invasion of a place called Attu Island. Who has ever heard of that? And if you look at it, it's on the tip of the Aleutian Islands, way out in the Pacific. Keep in mind, Alaska was an American territory at the time. But the Japanese there destroyed the field hospital that existed, and so their ship, Laverne's ship, turned into the hospital ship for the area. Anyway, he manned a 4-inch gun as the men invaded, and he was in on that invasion. And all of that finally was secured in Alaska, September of 1943. After which, they went to San Francisco, picked up soldiers, went to Honolulu, Hawaii, then to the Panama Canal over down the Atlantic side to Cuba, New York, and Boston. He changed his ships. The General H.W. Butler becomes his ships. There's a picture of that right there. That is a troop carrier. His job was he was responsible for training maintenance crews, gun crews, boat crews. They were about transporting troops, and they transported them to places like Casablanca in North Africa, to Bombay, India. They went to Australia and back to Bombay several times. They were in on the invasion of the Philippines, at Leyte and Samar. He earned a battle star there. Tindagiti and several other South Pacific islands. He left the South Pacific in May of 1945, went through the Panama Canal and on to France to pick up liberated American POWs and bring them back to Virginia, where he was finally granted shore duty after 3.5 years of sea time. He was discharged October the 25th, 1945, saw every continent except Antarctica, made a circuit of the earth, came back to Highland, worked at Wicks, married a gal named Opal in 1946, was married 61 years until her passing in 2007, had 3 daughters. A couple of them are with us today. This is Laverne Straught-Heide. He is a very talented man. Why don't we give him a hand? This morning too, his medals and a picture of his ship and so on. Abe pointing that out to you. Another of our veterans that are here is Burnell Petrie. He's right here in front of the flag. And Mr. Petrie, 91, almost 92 years of age. Now he graduated from St. Paul High School. We won't hold that against him. 1941, he graduated. He said second from the bottom in his class. I guess that's okay. If the class was small enough, but he didn't think so. But anyway, he ends up in the United States Army, and he trains and ends up in Glasgow, Scotland. And then in England, he drove truck, convoyed vehicles there, and he moves from England over to the Omaha beachhead 99 days after D-Day, and moves into France then. And his job was hauling bread, getting supplies in, food, gas, stuff like that. By December of 1944, he is in a place called Zarland in France. And you know, there's several things that when I talk to these veterans, and I'm thinking of Burnell and how he related it to me, these veterans and where they've served have seen things. There's things stamped, emblazoned on their brain that they can never forget. There's images that never go away, I'm told. Things that they see, and sometimes they retell them. And Burnell, there are some things that I took from him that are kind of images that won't go away. Finding a corpse in a snowy field, recalling a clothesless little girl, taking his jacket, putting it on her, and wondering whatever becomes of her. trapping a hare in a waterworks in Fenceman, a rabbit, and they wore the thing down. I don't know what he did. He ate it or captured it or what he did. He remembered a dental student being taken, it happened to be on the route that he was going and took her to school, and then eventually had a filling installed by this gal that would stay in there for years. These are things that these veterans remember. He was in Zarlaten when the war ended, and he recalls Americans bringing in potatoes for starvation relief, and the Germans had angered the Frenchmen, so the Frenchmen redirected those back. Anyway, he came home, went to Quincy College, then to St. Louis U for 2.5 years, and his message, he kept saying this to me, tell them to get an education. So people listen to Burnell and get your education. He likes to speak out about that. He married Mary, and you see her up here. There's an honor flight picture Burnell was a part of here recently. He married Mary in July of 1948. She passed away this September. They were married 67 years. He writes, the Sugar Creek Wanderer for the Shopper has since 1980. He asked me why the recognition. I didn't do anything. But he's part of the supply line. Stuff at the front doesn't work if the supply line behind it isn't operating as it should. That's what Burnell Petrie did. We're honored to have him here this morning. Burnell Petrie. By the way, Burnell was escorted by Mr. Matt Renner, 2012 graduate of Highland High School and United States Army, 2012 to the present. Jacob Troxel is with Laverne back here. Jacob is United States Marine Corps Reserve, graduate of Highland High School, 2014. And Brandon Troxel stands behind the empty chair, Highland High School, 2013, member of the U.S. Army Reserves currently. And now we're going to shift our attention from the supply line here to Jim Causey, who is right here. He's second from the end on this side. And I have up here in the front a United States World War II United States Navy uniform worn by my Alabama granddaddy. Right down here in front. I've shared that with you in the past. But I thought this was kind of fitting because Jim Causey, like my granddaddy, was from Alabama. And like my granddaddy, he joins the United States Navy. Now, he does it at age 17. He lost his mom at age 11, didn't have a great home life. But at 17, in 1945, he's in the Navy, and he's going to visit spots like Guam, Saipan, Midway, the Philippines. He said they followed the Marines into all these places. The Marines were chasing the Japanese out of these places. But his job was to build campsites and landing strips for the planes, mostly drove truck, unloaded equipment. He said, I was a seaman just doing as I was told. Another vision of his that kind of stays with is seeing our planes drop bombs on these islands as he was out on his ship in the water. But our boys would move in, he says, and then we would move on. After the war was declared over, he also has a memory of some of our guys being killed by sniper fire. And he also remembers some Japanese soldiers giving themselves up to some skinny dipping GIs. That's an interesting memory. But when he got enough points, he went home in 1946. He got married at age 21 to Inez, an Arkansas gal. 57 years, 6 months, and 3 days he said he was married. She passed away in 2006. He served in the Alabama National Guard after the war was over, and because of that was called back to duty in 1951. When the Korean War comes around, he never left stateside. But he's a southern boy that moved to Arkansas, and then finally, because of a job at General Motors here, moved to St. Louis in 1953. He would live in East St. Louis, and then Collinsville, and finally built a house on Buckeye Road right here in Highland in 1970. So he's been with us for 45 years. He says he's a better person because of the service and his understanding of the chain of command. He's a faith guy who's on the board of his church. This is James Causey. James, by the way, Jim Hobbs is graduate, 2008 Highland High School, and he's United States Navy. Thanks, Jim. And now, down here on my right, your left, is Leo and Frida Cahoon together. Look at it. World War II veterans, 94. And I don't know how old Frida is. I don't know if I'm kind of afraid to ask that one. You know, I know how the gals are about that. We have up here in the front, Abe is sitting right in front of I don't know, picture a plaque that commemorates his accident. Once again, the Battle of Bulge, we're coming full circle on this. And some of his awards and medals that he's got up here. But Leo went to the Geiger School out near Marine, ended up moving to Alhambra, worked on a farm until he was 21. He got drafted in August of 1943. Now listen to this, he was discharged in 1945 and somehow married Frida in April of 1944. So I guess he found a way, I guess a furlough or something, to sneak home and get the job done there, but starting a family. But so anyway, he's married, goes back, gets his basic training done, is sent to England, loaded us and Bailey Bridges in November of 44 across the Dover Straits to Omaha Beach, to a place called St. Vith in Belgium. Now, St. Vith happens to be right in the way of Hitler's mass strike against the Allied positions there, right on the German border, that of course created the big bulge that is now called the Battle of the Bulge. Through the snow and in the winter, they made this attack, and Leo said to me, he said, the Americans scattered like a bunch of quails when the Germans came into St. Vith, one of his memories. And there was 10 to 15 inches of snow that he recalls, and negative temperatures, and sometimes being out all night erecting bridges, and for more than 2 weeks, until the United States airmen could get their planes going again. The Germans kind of held sway there, and then they were pushed back. But he recalls getting trench foot and being in hospital with his foot in the air. He got well, of course, and they sent him back to the front. He talks about losing guys, artillery shrapnel. But his job was bridges. And some of the bridges that you see, there's a Treadway Bridge and different kinds of bridges that we see. But they got shelled in the process from time to time. And he has a recall. He says 88 screaming Mimis. You can hear them coming in. He said, during the last day of the war, another memory that he related was planes as far as you could see, both ways, Allied planes going in and pounding the Germans until they had to quit. On Victory in Europe Day, he was at Leipzig, and he ends up getting shipped to France. As a matter of fact, they were training him for the invasion of Japan, which thankfully never had happened as the war came to an end. After the war, he came back in this area. He worked at Olin, McDonald in St. Louis, Emerson Electric, Alton Box Board, and to Oklahoma for the oil fields for a year and a half. Had 2 boys and 2 girls. And I have to tell you, his #1 gal sitting right beside him, this is Frida. She made bullets in the East Alton Wood River Olin plant during World War II. She made gasoline for airplanes and the Standard Oil in World War II. So she's a heroine of this war effort as well. They have been together 71 years. This is Leo. Clifton Roberson stands behind me. He's a graduate of Highland High School in 2011, United States Army Reserves, and also the United States Marine. You see his Tim Friedel, who's a combat engineer in Marines. He's had 2 deployments in Afghanistan and seen all kinds of harrowing, interesting action over there. But we appreciate these folks escorting him this morning. What's the purpose? What's the purpose of telling these stories? You know, we have these young folks, high school students situated right around these veterans. The hope is to link right now with what these folks have seen and where these folks have been. That's the hope. I have a feeling, and I would like to see a show of hands of how many of you have a granddaddy, a great uncle, a great granddaddy, somebody in the family that was a part of the World War II effort that you know of. Raise your hand up there. You see, you're inextricably linked. You were there. And what this does is it gives you an opportunity to touch these places and to touch this massive effort. These stories here that we tell are illustrative of all of the stories in the room. Stories of Persian Gulf era, stories of Vietnam with rejection and efforts scorned. We will not forget those Vietnam folks. Stories that come back from Korea, you know, that forgotten, kind of unknown era. And then, of course, this morning we really highlight the stories of the World War II. Some have called it the greatest generation. Listen, I want to show you, see if you understand these numbers. Military deaths around the world in World War II, 22,500,000 up to 25 million. Civilian deaths, 37,585,000 to 55,200,000. They don't even know. Do you understand how many 37 million is? One of our teachers teaches a class in the Jews that attempted to exterminate 6 million, 6 to 7 million of them. There's another 31 million civilians that lost their lives. How in the world can that happen? Do you understand those numbers? I think they're too big to even grasp. 62 to 78 million total deaths in this era. Extermination, annihilation, horrific, catastrophic, evil, and internationals all over the place. Now, this generation right here in front of you banded together. They responded to this unfathomable horror. Do you realize that 16.1 million Americans served in World War II? And these folks you see, and some of these over here, were a part of that effort. Over 400,000 paid the supreme sacrifice for that effort. These folks became the standard in qualities like commitment, sacrifice, duty, just doing what you're told, perseverance, never giving up. Now, your generation out there has some whopper questions to answer about the world that you live in. I think looking backward is a great place to start. Now, right now, we have current military standing behind the older generation. We have this opportunity to see them together today because, as you guys can see, it's a great contrast. The young man becomes the older man, and the older man looks back and tells stories of his youth. One of the higher honors a military person can bestow is a salute. And I'm going to step out of the way as our younger men do that right now to this older generation. And I'm going to ask some of those that have pledged to serve from our high school, come on out and join these folks who have served and are serving. And we want to, once again, say thanks for the efforts of all of the veterans, World War II, and all of the areas represented here, because it's because of you in this country, faith, family, and freedom are realities. Highland High School, would you at this time please join me in a big show of appreciation for these veterans, past, present, and future, for their incredible service.
Once again, veterans, God bless you. Thank you for joining us this morning. And at this time, we're going to ask the veterans to come right here along the center of the floor and to make a line. And students of Highland High School, you are going to return to first hour. You will have an opportunity to come down through the line and touch or shake the hands of some of these veterans. So we're going to allow you to do that at this time. But if you would, veterans, come on down. All veterans, we invite you to just make a line all along this gym floor and give our students an opportunity to shake hands. Thank you, students. You're dismissed.